A show I loved and remembered was from Dries Van Noten. We were seated at a banquet table, a very, very long banquet table, and the girls actually walked right down the center of the banquet table.
Wow.
Yeah, that was
Wow.
incredible.
Wow.
Tom Ford showed in New York once, and it was held actually in a subway station. That was really beyond. Of course, the McQueen shows are memorable.
To say nothing of the Karl Lagerfeld Chanel
And,
shows.
oh, my goodness. I mean, one time they floated in an actual iceberg from the North Sea.
I mean, that's crazy. It's crazy.
And they had to keep, of course, the temperature in the room down.
Yeah.
So it didn't melt by the time we all showed up.
Welcome to the Culture Lounge podcast from Assouline, a curated sonic experience that brings together artists, visionaries, and tastemakers in conversation from around the world. I'm your curator, Alex Assouline. Today, from New York, we'll immerse ourselves in the fashion industry with Linda Fargo and Alina Cho. Linda Fargo is the Senior Vice President of Women's Fashion and Store Presentation Director at Bergdorf Goodman. Alina Cho is an Emmy-award-winning fashion journalist, contributor to CBS Sunday Morning, and host of the Met's The Atelier series. Linda and Alina are both well known for their taste, their ability to spot trends, and for leading conversations in the fashion industry. So, of course, I thought they would make the perfect pair for this chapter. And now, let's enter the Culture Lounge.
Hi, I'm Linda Fargo, and I'm here with Alina Cho, an Emmy-award-winning journalist and a good friend and fashion pal with a signature black bob.
And hi, everybody. I'm Alina Cho. So happy you're with us today. I am here with my dear friend and fashion pal, Linda Fargo, the woman with the signature white bob, style icon known the world over. So glad to be with you today. This is an opportunity for us to learn a bit more about each other, right?
So much to talk about. Let's get started.
Yeah, let's talk. Linda, I want to talk about the work that you're especially proud of, which are your windows, your visual displays, and your work as a visual artist. You've created well over 1,000 window displays in your career, many of them for Bergdorf Goodman. They're so fantastical, they're so involved, they're so detailed. I'm curious to know what makes a great window display. Where do you start? What are the ingredients?
Yeah. Starting point, like any design project, is always key. And I think a good visual artist is always looking for something to ignite an idea. For example, today in New York, it's raining. And I have a fascination for, especially on a very windy, rainy day, when all of a sudden all those black umbrellas, they can't hold up, they lose it, they get thrown in those trash cans. And I actually love the way they look because they're broken, the wind has blown them out, and the mannequin's hair then is kind of blown outwards into position, their clothes are moving.
It's like you're capturing a moment
in
time.
But where did that start? It started from just being alert and watching for something that excites you visually. I think windows, they have to be somewhat unexpected. I mean, you have to remember, it's theater. Mm-hmm. It really is theater.
Right.
And if you think that you're going to just take merchandise and put it in a window and think that you're just selling the things that are in the store, that's a window, but that's not really a window.
What's the goal? I mean, is the goal to get people to walk in?
I think the goal is more about speaking to the spirit of that store.
Right.
It's kind of like the ego and the id of that store itself. So you have to have a feeling for that. So, for example, Alina, when I first got to Bergdorf's, the windows were very pretty. They were very safe. And we didn't have much money. Let's always remember, most display departments work on very, very
shoestring budgets.
You
have to be creative.
So you have to be very good at DIY, repurposing found objects. And my very first window for them was supposed to go in the day after I arrived. And I go to the staff, so what are you putting in? They go, I don't know, we were waiting for you. I said, the windows are tomorrow. And what did I do? You're not going to believe this. I found these giant fly zapping lanterns that had been thrown in the trash. and we hung one per window, but we went to the novelty store and bought thousands and thousands of plastic
Wow.
flies.
Wow.
And we painstakingly glued them all over the glass, all over the windows, and the windows were nothing more than flies and a bug zapper.
Wow.
So I was starting to play with the image of a store, which was normally maybe thought of
Staid.
in a very, very respectful, very proper, very pretty. Everything was only kind of about beauty, if you will.
It was very Jackie O.
Yes, and I wanted to start playing with that idea.
Mix it up.
And over time, most of the people that we hired into the window team came from fine arts.
Oh, interesting. We've known each other a very long time. You were born and bred in Wisconsin, good Midwestern girl with great Midwestern sensibilities, even now after being in New York for so long. But I don't think I know how you even got interested in fashion. So tell me.
I think for me, the beginning of my interest in fashion was really more about costume and really the transformative quality of getting into costume. And I don't really think it was till I moved to New York and I started pressing my face up to the windows, Bergdorf's at the time, Bendel's, Bloomingdale's, that I started to kind of peer into these worlds of fashion, which was something entirely different really than costume itself.
Yeah, but it's one thing to sort of peer into the windows and be mesmerized by what you see, and another thing to say, I'm going to make this my career.
As an artist, I really thought I was coming to New York for the fine arts.
Interesting.
And I had been basically a found object artist, and a lot of my pieces were pieces that were under glass. So I made worlds under glass.
Okay, so that's sort of how that happened.
It is kind of fascinating. And
Those were window displays.
A window display is a world that's you're on the sidewalk, and there's an entire fantasy world, really, which is 10 inches away from you, separated by a half-inch thick sheet of glass, but it becomes another world because of that glass. I really came to fashion through the visual side, through the windows.
Got it. Got
Yes.
it. I mean, for me, it goes back to when I was a child and the movie Grease was coming out. I was a small girl, and I remember, that final scene with Olivia Newton-John where she's wearing that sexy black outfit and she's transformed.
A bit biker, right? Didn't she have a little biker jacket, maybe?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Biker jacket, tight black shirt, tight black pants. And I was, 6 or 8 years old, but I was mesmerized by those black satin pants. And it was my mission to find them. Now, I was 6 or 8 years old, so you can imagine it wasn't exactly something I could find in the store.
Right.
But it was the first time I remember thinking to myself that I was mesmerized by this whole idea of, in a sense, costume, right? And wearing something that you really love. Of course, I never found the pants, but that's where the love affair began, really.
Alina, before focusing on fashion, because for me, this is like fascinating. You reported from inside North Korea. You were feet away from President Obama when he delivered his 2008 winning speech, and you covered the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina and 9/11. How do you go from that to fashion?
What's interesting is I moved to New York in 1997, which seems like ancient history now, but 1997, and I was working in local news before that in Tampa, Florida. And I got this job as a newsreader at CNBC, and I remember thinking to myself, wow, well, that will put me on the national stage, even though it's at the time, a small network. I then worked at ABC News, and then I landed at CNN in 2004. And it was only then that I was encouraged to pitch stories, because other than breaking news, you really got on only when you pitched a story that producers would accept. And so I thought to myself, the producers are telling me to pitch anything. And if they like the idea, they'll say yes. So I started pitching stories on fashion, always with an eye toward, will this play for a mass audience? And so my question was always, will it play in Peoria? but also I don't want to alienate the Linda Fargos of the world, the Anna Winters of the world. So it has to be smart, but it also has to draw in the people who might not necessarily be interested in fashion. And I always like to say I started backstage live at the Oscar de la Renta and Carolina Herrera shows in New York, and it morphed into half-hour specials on New York Fashion Week, but also on Paris Couture. And it really was the start of me covering fashion for a mass audience.
It's interesting, Alina. I mean, really chapeau to you, because when you think about it, fashion had not really been covered by the news. It was, it was part of fashion magazines. And I really look at you as a person who treated it as actually news and something that from here to Peoria, people were interested in knowing about.
Oh, thank you.
And
thank
no,
you.
I mean, we thank you. I mean, it's serious business.
It is.
It's also glamorous. It's creative. It works on a lot of levels. It's certainly not just a commodity by any means.
No, and I think what has helped me, honestly, in terms of getting some story ideas across the finish line is that because of the internet, because of social media, now you don't have to be Linda Fargo or maybe to a lesser degree an Alina Cho to get a front row seat to fashion anymore. You can be in your bed looking at your iPhone, watching a fashion show in Paris.
So true.
Right?
I mean,
that has changed the game.
That it's the biggest game changer. I mean, the fashion industry used to be editors and retailers. Now everyone is in the game.
You're absolutely right. As we're on the topic of shows, you've been to some of the most incredible fashion shows that have ever been staged. What are some that stick out in your mind for whatever reason?
It's so hard because it's like your life flashing before you.
Yeah.
It's always a combination of things. Of course, it's the clothes, but it's very often the staging.
Right.
There was a show I loved and remembered was from Dries Van Noten. We were seated at a banquet table, a very, very long banquet table, and the girls actually walked right down the center of the banquet table.
Wow.
Yeah, that was incredible. Wow. Tom Ford showed in New York once, and it was held actually in a subway station. That was really beyond. Of course, the McQueen shows are memorable.
To say nothing of the Karl Lagerfeld Chanel shows.
Oh, my goodness. I mean, one time they floated in an actual iceberg from the North Sea.
I mean, that's crazy. It's crazy.
And they had to keep, of course, the temperature in the room down.
Yeah.
So it didn't melt by the time we all showed up. I mean, it's just beyond. And you really have to, it's easy to get jaded, but you really have to pinch yourself sometimes, say, you know what, this is a privilege. I am sitting here witnessing really performance art very often.
100%. I'll just say one that really sticks out in my mind. I don't know if you were there, but it was when Raf Simons made his debut at Dior. It was couture. And all the walls were lined with fresh flowers, and each room was a different color of flower. And I just remember thinking, and particularly at a house like Dior, which is steeped in so much history, you're thinking you're witnessing a moment in fashion history, and it definitely was. And so, yes, it's the clothes, but it's so much more than the clothes, and thanks to the internet and social media, I mean, people can have access, whether it's by YouTube or live streaming or whatever. They have access to the shows in a way that they never
it's true.
did before.
They get to live more. I mean, they used to be moments, and which really only kind of an exclusive group of people were able to enjoy and appreciate, and now it's shared.
Actually, one thing I want to talk about is, I guess in some ways I've always sort of felt like a de facto Bergdorf's employee, because people don't know this, but if you're not in fashion, but when you go to these fashion shows, they are oftentimes back to back to back to back. And because I'm a journalist, I don't have the luxury of being with a team and having a car service. And so before Uber, I'd be hailing taxis in the rain or taking an Uber and spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars. And so oftentimes, as you know, Linda, I would sort of nudge you in the seat next to me at
Where
the show.
are you going next?
Where
By
are you going
chance,
next?
Are you going to the Altazara show?
Are we going to the same show? Can I catch a ride?
Right.
And so
Well, you were always welcome. But oh my God, they were so fun. But Alina,
I would jump in the van with you.
I remember
Yeah.
one time we pit stopped at the Chelsea market
At the
and
taco stand.
and we ran to the taco stand. And this was really early days of social media. And we said, quick, let's take pictures.
Yeah,
How funny. Here we are on our fashion stuff and we're having tacos.
So glamorous.
And you were like, wait, let me check and you like checked
did
your
I?
makeup. I was like, she's such a pro.
Oh, you know me.
Anyways.
You know, if there's going to be a camera somewhere, I want to make sure I'm not shiny.
Well, I should take a lesson, honestly.
Oh,
I
please,
should take a
You're
lesson.
flawless, but I always appreciated that.
Once we even got Bill Cunningham to accept a
did
ride.
you? Oh,
You know,
yeah,
he
'cause
was
famously-
so far away in
Yeah.
Paris, the shows would be far apart. And
yeah.
Bill famously never actually would not take a favor of
Ever.
any kind from anyone. It was like
Not even a glass of water.
No, one time, Alina, I actually gave him, he did a little story about the windows, and I got him a small box of chocolates. A few days later, I see this person kind of my office was very hard to find. It was really like in the bowels of the store. And he finds me and returns the box of chocolates.
Yeah.
I mean,
So Bill
journalistic integrity to the max.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I wish we were all like that.
Bill was very interesting because he actually really spotted trends.
And he did it in his own way, right? It was just through a series of images where he would notice a trend. He would notice people were
Sometimes, Alina, it was
You know?
even that there would be a new body language going around.
That's right.
Do you remember when the camera started clicking, women started crossing their legs? And he called it the X, something like the X stand or something.
Oh my gosh, that's so
as
funny.
He did one of his Sunday style sections on it. I was like, you know what? Leave it to Bill to kind of nail us for this. And it was true. We all, as soon as that camera came out or the iPhone, the legs crossed.
That's right. That's right.
Into the X.
That's so Bill Cunningham, and he's sorely missed. He used to, because I lived down the street from him, he used to drop off printed images that he took of me with letters that I still have.
He's very,
and
very kind. He would very often
I'm sure he
come
did
and
that
bring
with you,
pictures
too.
of
I'm
you.
sure,
We
yeah.
saw him a lot,
Yeah.
because he was on Fifth Avenue and
That's right.
57th Street. It was really one of his posts.
I remember one time I saw him on a Sunday outside Bergdorf Goodman, and I said, what are you doing working on a Sunday? And he called everybody child. Remember, oh, child, I've never worked a day in my life. And you see, what I think is interesting about that is that I sort of think that applies to us. I think we both love what we do.
Yeah, it's like, work like you don't need the money.
That's right. We touched on this a little bit earlier, but what designers are you looking at, sort of emerging? Because I think we always look to Bergdorf Goodman as sort of that arbiter of what's about to blow up.
There's a very strange thing about us at Bergdorf's. Without even speaking about it, we kind of think like each other. When we see something new, we all kind of know it's going to pass the test.
Instinctively. Yeah.
Top of mind for us right now is Phoebe Philo.
Right.
Much awaited.
Yes.
We all know that she stepped out of the industry for a while, came back finally with her name on the door. She very famously worked for Chloe. She worked for Celine, and she put her name on it. And we at Bergdorf's are her first brick and mortar. Another one that we're really, really excited about is Schiaparelli. Daniel
Yes.
Roseberry's work for
Yes.
Schiaparelli, which I don't know if you know this, but Bergdorf's carried Schiaparelli, Elsa's work, from like somewhere
Back
in
in
the
the day.
mid-30s to the mid-50s.
Wow. I did
And this
not
was
know
really
that.
a return of Schiaparelli to Bergdorf's. Again, it was their first foray off of the Place Vendôme.
And by the way, you took on Schiaparelli before Daniel Roseberry, the creative director, really took off. You took a chance and it paid off. I mean, obviously you saw something in him and you saw something in what he was doing.
Schiaparelli, this is a little funny thing I maybe never told you. This was probably 12-ish years ago when I read that Diego Della Valle bought the brand. I started sending him notes and messages saying,
for
just
you.
so you know, we're here. When you're ready, we're ready. And it was very genuine because I personally love surrealism.
Of course.
And the House of Schiaparelli was very associated with it. And as you can see now, it plays out in all the pieces. You've got a shoe with a metal toes on
right.
the outside, and you've got an earring, which is actually an ear.
Right.
So surrealism remains very important to the house. But so we went after it very, very early when it was still just a dream, really.
Yeah. I do want to talk about memorable fashion moments. You've had so many. I mean, I can picture them in my mind. You know, you had an unbelievable birthday party one year where it was like, I forget, was it like the birds or
Grey Gardens.
That's right, Grey Gardens. Grey
I
Gardens.
waited for years to do that
And I
party.
still remember what you wore. It was very DIY. But you've had some moments, and I will say I'm a little bit more of a safe Sally when it comes to dressing. You know, I don't take as many chances as you
his
do.
own.
That's right. I would say I'm a little safer, but I envy you because you have the courage to take these risks. So can you think of maybe one or two instances where, I don't know, you were terrified to walk out the door, am I making the right decision, or something that you just loved?
Okay. It was either a fashion faux pas or it was fashion fabulous.
Right.
And why I decided to take a risk at probably one of the most high wire fashion moments, which was for the Met Gala.
Right.
Actually, two of them that I was
The Super Bowl of fashion.
Super Bowl of fashion, nervous to walk out the door. One was for Anglomania, and I got a ticket at the very last second, pulled out the sewing machine, sewed basically a British flag inside out with all deconstructed with pins. I did it very punk because, as we all
remember the outfit.
we all
I
know
can
that
picture it.
that London was really the genesis of punk.
You sewed it yourself?
Sewed it myself.
Bravo,
and
Linda
I
Fargo.
did these fabulous letters, these bullion letters that said, God save the queens, through the skirt. I put my hair up in some very lopsided giant bouffant. So I was kind of neo-punk. But one more thing about that outfit. First of all, I underestimated how hard it is to ascend a stairway.
Yes.
In a giant ball gown. So I was just shaking.
And it must have, if it was a flag, it must have been heavy too.
It was large. Then, as luck would have it, I arrived sandwiched between Alexander McQueen and Sarah Jessica Parker arrived just before me, and right behind me was Vivienne Westwood.
Wow.
So the paparazzi was shouting and screaming at the top of their lungs, which also I'm not used to that. I don't live on a red carpet like that. So I think my knees were literally knocking, and I was simply just trying not to fall over. But that was a very risky outfit because it was very homemade.
But it paid off, and it's still memorable to this day.
It really saluted the Met. And the last one, and I won't carry on about this, but these things do say was for punk. Mm-hmm. The punk exhibit, and I went to the East Village and I had a dominatrix make me this rubber dress, and I wore like faux barbed wire in my hair.
It must have been hot. Did you wear a rubber
It was a little
dress?
hot.
Yeah, I bet it was hot.
And Alina, I thought you looked beyond when you received the CFDA award.
Oh, thank you.
Would I be correct to guess that might have been one of your more memorable fashion moments?
It probably is the most memorable for a variety of reasons, mostly because of the backstory. It's incredible. So last November, I received the CFDA Media Award. The CFDA is really the governing body, as you know, for American fashion, and they honor one journalist every year. And last year, they honored me. And it was really, other than receiving an Emmy Award for some stories that I've done, it really was the honor of my life. So that was November. In June of that year, I happened to be in LA for a dinner that Chanel and the Costume Institute of the Met hosted. And I tell you this because I traveled to LA because I sort of wanted to have some FaceTime with Tom Brown, who is Andrew Bolton's partner and obviously a famous fashion designer in his own right, but Andrew is the curator of the Costume Institute. And I thought it would be nice to spend some time with them. I'm going to fly out to LA. Who wouldn't want to go to a Chanel dinner anyway? There was a dress that I had been eyeing, I am not kidding you, for 7 or 8 months that I desperately wanted. It was a classic black Chanel lace and velvet dress, but I loved it. And I loved the way I felt in it. I loved the way I looked in it. I thought and thought and thought about it because a Chanel purchase is obviously a big deal. So finally, when I decided I was going to go to this dinner, I said, I'm going to get it. I wore it to the dinner. I walk into the dinner at Mr. Chow in Beverly Hills. The first person I see is Tom Brown. And he said, I need to talk to you. So he pulls me aside, and it was at that moment that he told me that I was going to receive the CFDA Media Award. And he said, I had the board vote early because I knew I was going to see you, and I wanted to tell you in person. Well, wouldn't you know it, I was wearing that dress that I had pined over for months and months and months. And it was in that moment, because you know that the CFDA Awards is several months ahead. It was at that moment that I thought, that's the dress I'm going to wear on that night 3 months down the line, where if I hadn't known that, it would have been
A scramble.
And headache after headache. But I chose that dress because I thought to myself, when I look back on those photos 20 years from now, I want to be wearing something that I feel is timeless. And so I think it did the job, and I felt great that night, and it was a beautiful night. And again, you were in the room.
I was there,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you were stunning, and
Thank you.
I love that you had your mother with you.
Yes, my mom was there.
And there was really a lot of support for you in the room. You spoke
thank you.
beautifully.
Oh, thank
I
you, Linda.
recorded you.
I know you did. You
As
posted it,
usual,
yeah.
you were incredibly poised and pointed.
Thank you.
And
Well, it was a huge
I
honor.
think, again, bringing it all back around, fashion, the right piece of clothing at the right time, knowing what's good for you, it kind of gives you a superpower.
It totally does. And I felt that on stage. And it wasn't the dress, but it was the dress.
And the
You know?
hair. And the hair.
And I'm so thrilled that we did this.
This was so much fun. Thank you to Assouline for inviting us to come and do this,
That's
because
right.
it was a great excuse for you and I to get better acquainted.
And what an honor to be part of the inaugural season.
Yes.
So Assouline, thank you very much. Thank you everyone for listening. We hope you enjoyed it, and we hope you learned a thing or two.
Thank you. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Culture Lounge. If you want to dive deeper into the world of fashion, Assouline has many books to guide your way, like the Impossible Collection of Fashion, the Dior series, and Louis Vuitton Virgil Abloh. I'll leave you with a fun bit of trivia I learned from our book, Chanel, The Impossible Collection. Did you know that Coco Chanel began her career selling hats in her first boutique at 21 Rue Cambon in 1910? The hat sold well, and she eventually became a couturière after opening her second boutique in Normandy in 1913. Her first couture establishment only opened in 1915 in the fashionable resort town of Biarritz. In our next chapter, we're learning the nuances of fine wines with Enrico Bernardo and Sébastien Lam. Subscribe to the Culture Lounge so you don't miss it. For more inspiration, head to assouline.com, where culture meets luxury. À bientôt.